Music, Jaclyn Smith, the ageless angel of American television, is the embodiment of elegance, grace, and timeless beauty. In the memories of millions from the golden era of the 1970s, the name Kelly Garrett from Charlie's Angels was far more than just a character. It was a living symbol of charm, strength, and sophistication that defined an entire generation. That radiant smile and mesmerizing presence once captured the dreams of countless hearts. Yet the brightest spotlight could never pierce the shadows lurking behind her perfect image. Hidden from the adoring public were searing wounds, 4 marriages shattered, a love story crushed by fate, the devastating loss of the son she raised as her own, and a harrowing battle with breast cancer that once left the world in stunned disbelief. And now, at the age of 79, when one might hope for serenity and rest, pain still clings to her life like an unyielding shadow, refusing to let her go, gnawing at the edges of a soul that has weathered storm after storm. What unimaginable truths lie behind the grace of the woman who once defined television's golden years? Before we begin, we would be honored to hear from you. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate Jaclyn Smith as the icon who forever marked your memories? Before the world ever knew her as an angel, Jaclyn Smith was a quiet little girl in Houston, Texas. Born in 1945 into a house where order was absolute, silence was unspoken law, and feelings were things you learned to lock away rather than share. Her father, Jack Smith, a Russian Jewish dentist, carried himself with the strict discipline of his profession. His love expressed more in provision than in words. Her mother, Margaret Ellen, gentle yet reserved, was not one to indulge in the arts or encourage dreams that could not be measured in practicality. In that home, life followed a rigid, unchanging rhythm: school, church, obedience, while imagination had no place in the family ledger. It wasn't that my dreams were forbidden, she would recall decades later in a 2015 interview. It's that they were quietly set aside, like something fragile you didn't know what to do with. From the outside, she seemed the model daughter, polite, calm, and untroubled. But her stillness was not emptiness. It was Adam holding back a river. Beneath that composed exterior, a longing was building, and it found its only stage in the private corners of her mind. She fell in love with ballet, not as a pastime, but as a lifeline, a sanctuary where her movements spoke the words her voice could not. Alone in her bedroom, she would dance until the world outside dissolved, her slender frame bending and turning not for applause, but for survival. While other children played under the Texas sun, Jaclyn was inside turning discipline into grace, and grace into a form of quiet rebellion. Her dream of becoming a ballerina was never fed by cheers from an audience. It was a secret covenant between her and the part of herself she feared might otherwise disappear. Yet to her family, ballet was neither a future nor a calling, but a pleasant distraction that could not compete with real responsibilities. They did not forbid it, but neither did they believe in it. The thought of their daughter leaving Houston for the arts felt distant, almost fanciful. But by the age of 19, the weight of unspoken dreams had become heavier than the fear of the unknown, and she chose to leave. When she arrived in New York City, in the mid-1960s, accepted into the prestigious American Ballet School, she carried both hope and the ache of leaving behind a world that had never truly seen her. The city was dazzling from afar, but up close it was cold, competitive, and merciless. Days bled into nights of aching muscles, torn slippers, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into the soul. Ballet, once her refuge, now stood before her as something unyielding, its beauty hiding a punishing indifference. Eventually, she let it go, not with an applause-filled farewell, but in a quiet act of mourning, as though burying a piece of herself no one else had ever met. Letting go of ballet didn't feel like failure, she said softly years later. It felt like losing a part of myself I'd never get back. That loss was invisible to the world. But to Jaclyn, it was a private heartbreak as deep as any public tragedy. And yet from the ashes of that dream, something else endured. A silent strength, a measured poise, a resilience forged in the very quiet that once confined her. She could not have known it then, but the same endurance that had carried her through The loneliness of her childhood and the grief of her first great loss would one day become the unseen foundation of the woman the world would revere, not just for her beauty, but for the grace with which she survived everything that tried to silence her. After the curtain quietly closed on her belit dream, Jaclyn Smith stepped into a different kind of stage. One with no music to guide her and no applause to soften the silence. Finding herself adrift along the vast, unwelcoming avenues of New York, a city whose lights could paint the skyline in gold, yet leave a newcomer standing in shadows so cold they cut straight to the bone. It was the early 1970s, and at just 25, she was a young woman without a stage, without a script, without even the familiar rhythm of disciplined choreography to anchor her days, carrying only the dull, constant ache of something lost and the fragile but unyielding spark of a will that refused to be extinguished. In place of the artistry she had known, she turned toward a world that was foreign and uncertain. The relentless arena of modeling and commercials, where survival itself, not art, was the currency. Her earliest assignments, fleeting ads for Listerine and Breck shampoo, were humble and stripped of glamour. Yet for someone who had spent their youth, behind the veil of silence and self-restraint, the simple act of being seen through the camera's lens felt almost like a private rebellion against the years that had taught her to stay small. But this climb was carved from stone, not paved in gold. The audition rooms were battlegrounds lined with faces louder, bolder, more connected, their confidence filling every corner. While hers was a quiet kind, easily overlooked, easily underestimated. Each rejection struck like an echo from the past, a cruel whisper that she would never be enough. She carried with her the sting of one particular loss. The role of Victoria Winters in the gothic soap Dark Shadows in 1966, which slipped through her fingers and into the hands of Kate Jackson. A name destiny would later stitch into her life's most defining chapter. Every no felt like being told to disappear again, she would confess decades later, her voice calm but edged with the kind of memory that never fully fades. Yet Jaclyn did not vanish, she endured. In 1970, she secured a small role in The Adventurers, portraying a journalist. The film stumbled at the box office, but for her it was a milestone, a moment where she had lines, a character, a place on screen that could not be erased. Though audiences did not yet know her name, they began to feel her presence. Around 1973, in a twist of fate that would prove vital, she appeared in a series of shampoo ads alongside Farrah Fawcett. The chemistry between them was immediate and genuine. Two women navigating an unforgiving industry with a blend of tenderness and quiet steel that would one day anchor them in storms neither could foresee. That friendship would become a lifeline when in early 1976, Kate Jackson, now already cast in a new television series, spoke Jaclyn's name for a role that might change her life. Kelly Garrett in Charlie's Angels. But even this turning point came, wrapped in doubt. Jaclyn was not the producer's first choice, her style lacking the brash charisma Hollywood adored. Instead, she offered something rarer, a quiet magnetism, a grace that did not beg for the spotlight, yet could hold it as if it belonged to her all along. When Charlie's Angels premiered on September 22, 1976, the world's gaze finally settled upon her, and it never turned away. What the public saw as an overnight triumph was, in truth, the culmination of a lifetime's unseen battles, the suffocating stillness of her childhood home, the lonely hours in a ballet studio where her dreams both bloomed and broke, the unlit casting, rooms where doors closed again and again. Her ascent was not a lucky accident. It was the hard-forged victory of a woman who had learned to turn wounds into wisdom, pain into poise, and who understood long before the cameras rolled that beauty alone could never survive the road she'd been forced to walk. By the late 1970s, Jaclyn Smith was no longer just an actress. She had become a fixture in the American living room, the serene yet quietly unyielding face of Kelly Garrett in Charlie's Angels, a role that seemed to wrap her in an aura of effortless grace. Her image was everywhere on board games and lunchboxes, gracing glossy magazine covers, and lighting up primetime television screens from coast to coast. For the world, she was a phenomenon. For Jaclyn, it was the summit reached after years of clawing. Her way through a landscape of silence, rejection, and self-doubt that had once threatened to swallow her whole. And yet, hidden beneath the glow of that meteoric fame was a truth she rarely voiced. success itself could become a crucible, burning as hot as the struggles that had preceded it. She brought to Kelly Garrett something the cameras could not script: a quiet power rooted in authenticity, a grounded beauty, and a refusal to be anything but real. And that honesty struck an immediate chord with audiences. The show soared, and with it, so did she. But the spotlight, while warm, was also merciless. It demanded perfection, Fadan image that had to be maintained without falter, and turned every Mr. Pinto a public spectacle. By 1978, her salary had risen to an unprecedented $40,000 per episode, an extraordinary achievement for a woman in a male-dominated industry, a silent declaration that she had earned her place.